Hi, everyone, and welcome to a very special Legal Insights edition of Roofing Contractors Best of Success podcast show. I'm RC Editor-in-Chief Art Eisner, and I'm happy to be joined as usual today by Trent Cotney, partner with Adams and Reese. And joining us today are two contractors, Tony Wells, president of Ashton McGee Restoration in Minneapolis, and Dan Lillenstahl, CEO of MNRC in Burnsville, Minnesota. We've got two Minnesota contractors. Hi, everyone. Thanks for being here.
Hey, Art.
Thank you, Art. Happy to be here.
Yes. Well, we're all here to discuss some concerning legislation on worker classification issues that's being debated right now in Minnesota and could have far-reaching effects for other roofing contractors around the country. So let's start off. Dan, tell us about what's happening in your home state and what are you concerned about?
Yeah, appreciate the question. So just a matter of a few weeks ago, the bill HF 4444 was written and introduced, set to pass or be voted on rather on May 20th. So there's not yet a lot of awareness about this bill. And as it's written today, it has some pretty far-reaching implications to contractors in particular in how they conduct business today. And one of the biggest concerns of that bill is the speed in which it's set to be voted on. With such limited time between the bill being written, its initial introduction, and it's being voted on just a mere 8 weeks later, doesn't leave a lot of time for parties of opposition to make their voices heard.
Got it. So it's something that's being fast tracked, and it can have some obviously it's got some impact on contractors. What specifically though would it possibly how could it possibly impact your business?
Certainly. So one of the biggest portions of the bill is how the bill is written on subcontractors that are currently classified as 1099 and the additional requirements that are included. Minnesota currently has 9 requirements for 1099 classification. This bill introduces 5 more for a total of 14, and those classifications all must be met. And so that, in addition to the timeline of those requirements needing to be met in the middle of a construction season in a state like Minnesota, when we have so little time to complete the work that we are planning to work, is really impactful to the industry itself. Many contractors already have bids established, bids set, and are expecting to break ground in a matter of weeks or months on projects. And a bill that could pass and make changes to the way that we do business in the middle of a season could be negatively impact not only to the contractors themselves, but to the consumers that are expecting that work to take place.
Wow. So Trent, let's bring you in here. Are Dan and Tony's concerns, particularly the one he just mentioned, are they on target? And what are you seeing about this legislation that's giving you some red flags?
Yeah, our kudos to Dan and Tony for bringing this to the forefront. This is a big issue, and what I'm seeing out of this legislation is similar to what California has. Minnesota is a heavily regulated state to begin with, and I echo their concerns about implementation and just even if it goes through as written, it takes a while to ensure compliance. One of the things that concerns me, at least from a legal standpoint, is one of the big, statements that they said in some of the press releases was that there's going to be a lot of interagency coordination among, Minnesota's Department of Labor, their, Department of Revenue, and DEED, their, financial planning portion of their agency. So what you could potentially see is that if someone is, being investigated from a Department of Labor standpoint, for misclassification, they could potentially be facing, tax issues as well as a whole host of other issues through one investigation. Obviously, a big issue. One of the things that I spoke on recently at IRE was the fact that subcontractors dominate the industry. The stats I've seen is roughly 85 to 90% of all residential roofing contractors use sub labor coast to coast, and 55 to 60% of commercial do. So it's become part of our industry, and the problem is that a lot of these regulations are are done in a vacuum without understanding the reality of construction or small businesses that are helping them, make those tax payments and keep people working. So I agree that, there are some bad actors out there that, some of this regulation may help, but again, I think that we need to hear from more stakeholders, put on the brakes and figure out a good compromise, rather than kind of push this through without enough, thought in the process.
We're trying, no doubt we've talked a lot about subcontractors and the reports impact they have on the industry. As you mentioned, right, that's only growing in importance. Some of those actions we have seen, though, it's really been kind of a looking at this classification issue from the federal level. Uh, Now we're seeing more and more, or I guess, states picking this up. You mentioned California. Typically that or Florida are kind of the trendsetters in this space. Uh, why Minnesota? Are you surprised that we're seeing this becoming one of the first states to take this on individually?
No, Minnesota, there's a handful of states that have deep regulation. Minnesota's always been one of them. Minnesota, Illinois, California, Pacific Northwest, Florida. You can expect, I guarantee while we're talking right now, Minnesota's already put another regulation out that's going to be detrimental to contractors. So it kind of comes with the territory. I anticipate this kind of legislation happening. And that's why I think it's so important that we're talking about it, right? Because oftentimes contractors are just focused on, keeping the lights on. There's stuff like this that can, completely shut their doors and it may fly under the radar. So it's important to highlight this, especially as these things kind of come up, in different areas. I mean, that, to kind of reiterate the point I was making, it's these lawmakers don't understand construction. They don't understand what it takes to put on a roof, and they don't understand the realities of that. Right. And all this stuff is great if you're sitting in an ivory tower somewhere writing legislation. But, if you're up on a roof, if you're employing people, if you're, making money that ultimately turns into tax dollars, it is a different thing. And I really think that, the representatives and senators out there need to have a better understanding of what the reality of construction is before they start making sweeping legislation like this.
Tony, you've got some concerns about this as well. I want to give you an opportunity, but also you feel that other contractors outside of Minnesota need to be paying attention, right?
I do, and I appreciate all you gentlemen being on the call today. As for me, I look at it as I believe I understand the hearts actually behind the government and what they're trying to accomplish here. But I would ask just for some more time, for us to collaborate and to really understand their concerns, so that way we can work together to find a solution that works for everybody, to where construction companies such as Ashton McGee Restoration Group or MNRC, where if they were to just slam this through on May 20th, there might be companies that just have to shut their doors. And Trent, you said it, that if that were to happen, I mean, that's actually be lost tax dollars. So for me, my biggest concern is not of what they're proposing that could never take place. It's just let's sit down, let's work together to figure out a timeline of what actually can be done and when it could be done, and maybe what they're trying to pass currently. Maybe it's overreaching, maybe it's not. I'm not a politician, but I do know that if it were to pass May 20th, we have our employees are W-2 employees, so I'm not worried about it from that standpoint. But I am concerned about our subs. Our subs are 1099, and I cannot say for sure if their laborers are all W-2 employees, and if they're not, that would mean that they're going to have to fire every single one of their laborers. And then the homeowners here in, say, Minnesota are not going to be able to get their roofs built or the siding of their windows installed. Mm-hmm. So I do have concern of how quickly they're trying to pass this. And I would just personally just ask, just give us more time so we can work together collaboratively to better understand what their goals are and see where we can come together.
Trent, even if the vote is, this May or sometime before, peak season really kicks off. Could this impact roofers yet this year, or would this likely be something that would be implemented after the first of the year? Or are they really trying to fast track that for this season?
Yeah, from what I understand, if that law goes into effect in May, then you're off to the races. I mean, the problem as I see it is, yeah, there's a lot of risk mitigation steps that a contractor can take to comply with the law as written, assuming that there's no changes, but that takes time. And it's fun. I was just in Chicago earlier in the week, and I was talking to roofing contractors up there, and they were saying the same thing. They said, look, we can't keep up with the amount of regulation changes. Like every year, it's a different change. And as soon as we roll out our new employee manual, our new safety manual, there's 10 other new rules, and we got to go back to the drawing board. We can't keep up with all of the changes. And that's a sentiment that I see throughout the heavily regulated states is, look, we're just trying to make a living and navigate. It's almost a full-time job. Every contractor has to be a insurance salesman, accountant, and lawyer just to figure stuff out now. And that's my issue is, look, I think there's some good to come out of this. I agree that there are bad actors out there and there are ways to regulate it, but my concern is that the way that it's written, the way that it's unfolding is that I'm concerned it's going to be more of a witch hunt, and that's not how it needs to be. I think that there can be some collaboration where both, contractors and other industries sit across the table and figure out how do we work within the confines of this and make sure that we can continue operating and doing business and employing people and, paying tax dollars.
Do you get the sense that this is, being pushed by, is it, big insurance, or what are the behind the scenes mechanics here that are really trying to get this into law?
I can probably speak a little bit to that. I don't know definitively, but I can tell you that federally, the Biden administration has been very pro-union, and unions have gained a lot of power, whether that's good or bad. I mean, we represent plenty of contractors that are signatories and plenty that don't, right? But I anticipate, I always say that no piece of legislation exists without someone lobbying for it. It's not, rarely are legislators saying, hey, I think it's a great idea we come up with this. There's usually an impetus behind it. So whether that's union or that's something else, I don't know. I know there's a big push to eliminate 1099s because one, the more employees there are, the more payroll tax dollars there are. And two, it does oftentimes benefit unions depending on what industry you're in. So again, don't know if that's the real reason behind it, but I've seen similar legislation, there might be something to that. So.
Okay, Dan, I don't know if you have any insight on that. Go ahead. And also, are there any associations that you and other contractors are working with, or to try to get, your voice heard?
Yeah, certainly. I don't have any concrete information, and I certainly don't want to put on a tinfoil hat at this time about what might be behind the scenes. But I think Trent articulated the way things work with legislation passing eloquently enough for our audience to pick up what we're putting down. With that said, yeah, we definitely have some allies close to these lawmakers, and there's Housing First of Minnesota. There's also CAM. These groups are really looking out as advocates for the trades in Minnesota. And if we reach out to them and have conversations with those folks, our voices will be heard louder and more frequently. There's also a day at the Capitol on April 3rd that anyone that has concern can either or maybe just show up. Our presence matters. And so those are a couple things we can do, right? We can make calls, we can send emails, and we can show up and just let the lawmakers know before the bill passes, we have real and genuine concerns about those impacts.
Okay. Trent, what do you suggest for, any, for these guys or any contractors that are just learning about this right now? What can they do? How can they prepare themselves?
Yeah. So a couple of things, again, kudos to Dan and Tony speaking like this, if you aren't in the know, if you aren't paying attention, there's laws and rules and regulations that are passed like this daily that impact your business. So your voice has to be heard. You have to speak up. Being involved with groups, whether it's through associations or other like-minded people, that is a way to, really gain some traction and, participating in, both your state and, I'm about to fly up for roofing day in DC in a couple of weeks, and get in front of, your congressmen and women. That is a great way, gain that rapport, make sure that your voice is heard. I would rather be part of the process than be an outsider looking in, right? And, look, none of us, I think with the exception of lawyers, politicians probably have the worst name out there. But I can tell you, I've really gained some respect and worked with a lot of politicians that want to do good, that want to learn and understand what roofing is about. And I think this is just another great example of, a grassroots type movement that, may gain some traction and hopefully, if nothing else, help educate our, representatives and senators as to, what the issues are.
Okay, Dan, is there any contact information, or is there anywhere to steer contractors that might be interested in learning more?
I would encourage any contractor to begin by talking with their legal team and going through that channel. That would be a first step so that they can get some relevant and real guidance from their lawyers and then take it from there.
All right. Well, thank you all for your insight today and for sharing your stories. And before everybody leaves, if you're not already signed up, please be sure to sign up for our e-magazine and our new range of free e-newsletters on roofingcontractor.com, so you can follow this legislation and stay on top of the latest news and information impacting the entire roofing industry. Stay safe, and we will see you next time.